Welcome to the Explainer. You know, history usually remembers the loudest voices. We tend to celebrate the famous leaders, the grand speeches, and those massive defining moments. But the source text we're analyzing today, it forces us to look away from the grandstand and peer down into the very foundation of the nation. It speaks of a man who, as the text beautifully puts it, came with a closed fist and left with open hands. Today we're taking a somber, deeply respectful look at a life that gave literally everything to a cause, only to fade into the quiet margins of history.
Furrowed brows, a steady gaze, serious lips. The text introduces this figure not with some long list of achievements, but with a visceral description of a photograph. The author describes the sheer, raw intensity radiating from this man's face. The text notes that enthusiasm and passion seemed to literally drip from his features. The wrinkles on his face revealed emotions so powerful, so deep, that no one looking at him could possibly remain unaffected.
He was a 30-year-old warrior, a man in the absolute prime of his youth, who, just a day ago on May 25th, during Baisakhi Purnima, departed from this world smiling like a flower. So, which leads us to the burning question posed by the author. Who was he?
Okay, let's dive into this. The man we're talking about, the core subject of our explainer today, is Kamal Singh Chauhan. It's a name you probably won't find in standard history textbooks, but he's a figure whose life completely encapsulates the very essence of sacrifice.
Section 1. An unsung martyr. A life extinguished at 30.
Section 2. From wandering to resolve. The early aimless years.
You see, Kamal Singh Chauhan wasn't exactly born a seasoned revolutionary. He was born in a tiny, obscure village called Gari Haju, over in Avalkeda, Agra. His origins were incredibly ordinary. He was born into poverty and received only a very basic Hindi education. There were no early signs of grandeur here, no elite schooling that destined him for national politics. He was, at his core, just a boy from a humble background.
And this brilliantly illustrates his restless nature. I mean, the second he outgrew his childhood playtime, he left home and began this intense period of aimless wandering. One moment, he's a young teenager working a grueling job in the GIP railway. The next, he's moved all the way to Pune. Then, in his late teens, he's opening a shop in Bombay. And finally, he's just touring around Rajputana. By the age of 20, he was utterly exhausted, desperately searching for some kind of purpose.
Section 3. Satyagraha and Fierce Struggle. The 1930 Turning Point. And wow, that purpose he was looking for? It arrived like a lightning bolt when Mahatma Gandhi sounded the battle cry for the Satyagraha movement.
10. His Kshatriya blood boiled, and from that defining moment in 1930, he threw all his youthful plans out the window, tied a shroud around his head, and dedicated the next 10 years of his life to a relentless, fierce struggle for the nation. A full decade of his youth given entirely to the movement without a second thought for his personal safety or his future.
7. In those 10 short years, he served 7 separate prison terms. Just take a second to think about the sheer willpower required to endure that. While others in politics were carefully protecting themselves, looking for opportunistic moments, Kamal Singh was throwing himself right into the fire. The text actually describes him as an untamed colt who knew the risks perfectly well but chose to ignore them because the fire inside him was just burning him up.
This absolute fearlessness really culminated in the Jarrar incident. During a protest, he was literally crushed beneath the hooves of police horses. It was a visceral, brutal moment that absolutely should have killed him. But, as the source recounts, he fought death itself, rolled over and stood right back up. He didn't just survive, he emerged from this horrific violence having learned not just passion, but profound consciousness and resilience.
Section 4. Social Reform and Opposition. Shifting to Societal Building.
So, once the Satyagraha movement paused, Kamal Singh didn't just go home and rest. He shifted all that immense energy straight into his community. He taught people how to weave khadi, literally carrying bundles of it on his head to sell. He ran around distributing medicines to the sick. He traveled from village to village spreading constructive literature, educating marginalized Harijan communities, and spreading positive thoughts among the general public. We see a man who is deeply, genuinely committed to the grassroots rebuilding of his society. But, you know, doing good work doesn't always win you friends. He faced severe societal backlash. People opposed him, called him terrible names, falsely accused him of things, and even boycotted him. Yet, the text notes he remained completely unfazed. He'd look at the ignorance of the people, give a simple smile, and just laugh off all the opposition. His smile practically became his armor against public malice. His activism also took him to some totally new fronts.
When the call came for the Hindu Dharma Raksha movement, he didn't hesitate. He literally abandoned a comfortable teaching post at the Gwalior Arya Pathshala, packed his bags, and went to Hyderabad, where he ended up breaking stones in a prison. It's a striking historical fact of his life. He consistently chose grueling physical labor and incarceration over any kind of personal comfort.
Section 5. Disillusionment with politics. The dark night of the soul.
Now, what's really interesting about this phase of his life is the deeply tragic contrast. On one side, you have Kamal Singh's pure intentions for national upliftment and spiritual peace. But on the other, he was pitted directly against what the text calls the disease of party politics. As his peers gained just a little bit of power, they became infected by factionalism. His former companions actually turned against him with malice and hostility simply because he wouldn't play their petty games. Though, crucially, the text notes that none of them ever had the courage to point a finger at his actual underlying character.
But honestly, the combination of that betrayal and years of intense physical abuse had taken a massive toll. The reality of his sacrifice was horrifyingly physical. His body had been systematically ruined by repeated jail terms and beatings from police lathis. He lived in extreme economic hardship. The text gives us these startling, incredibly grounded details. He suffered from sudden, frequent nosebleeds, and even minor heat would cause severe dizziness. He was a man physically broken by the very struggle he dedicated his entire life to.
Section 6. The Silent Foundation of Freedom. Seeking Peace and His Quiet Death.
Exhausted by those bitter conflicts and physically shattered, his soul just sought a quiet refuge back in Agra. But it was here that his journey came to a very quiet end. On May 15th, he contracted a fever. Hoping to recover, he returned to his home village. But the fever didn't break. As the author poetically writes, the fever said, "Let's go," and Kamal Singh, quietly bowing his head, just went along with it. He passed away on May 25th. He didn't die a glorious death on a battlefield. He died quietly, having squeezed out literally every drop of his life's essence for his motherland over the years. When the end came, he only had a hollow shell of a body left, which he left behind with a smile.
The text concludes with a breathtakingly powerful metaphor. It notes that the noisy world, caught up in its endless song and dance, will forget him in a few moments. But, the author writes, if one inspects the mortar of the great wall of this independent country, they will see how the blood of this silent ascetic has made it so much stronger. So, the crucial point is this: the visible wall of a nation's freedom is held together by the completely invisible mortar of countless uncelebrated lives.
Kamal Singh Chauhan was really just one of these silent pillars. He fought, he suffered, he built, and he faded away quietly at the age of 30. It really forces us to look around at the liberties we so often take for granted and ask ourselves, how many other silent ascetics' blood forms the unseen foundation of the freedoms we enjoy today? Well, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I encourage you to keep questioning the history beneath the surface.